and welcome to episode 53 of Toke Signals TV, where we bring you the biggest in cannabis and hemp news stories every week. I'm Steve Elliott, the editor at tokesignals.com, and I'll be guiding you through the news. First, let's look at our bud pick of the week. Things are getting tasty looking in my grow room, as you can see from this flower of Frankenstein. It's an indica, and she's 43 days into flower. Let's look at the news now, shall we? We have two interesting stories, especially when considered together, from Colorado, from the forefront of legalization there, where they're implementing Amendment 64, passed in 2012 by Colorado voters. In our first story, teen marijuana use is down since legalization. Rates of current and lifetime marijuana use among Colorado high school students have dropped since the state's voters made marijuana legal in 2012, and that's according to a Thursday press release from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment. 30-day marijuana use fell from 22% in 2011 to 20% in 2013, and lifetime use declined from 39% to 37% during the same 2 years, according to the release. It has dropped nearly 5 points since 2009, 24.8%, when hundreds of medical marijuana stores began opening throughout Colorado. The state began regulating medical marijuana in 2010, and the press release says the drop from 2011 to 2013 is not statistically significant, but it appears that the drop from 2009 to 2013 could be. In either case, it's clear that use among high school students has not increased. Nationwide, the rate of current teen marijuana use increased from 20.8% in 2009 to 23.1% in 2011 and 23.4% in 2013, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. And that's the High School Youth Risk Behavior Survey. Colorado is successfully regulating marijuana, according to a 35-page report released last week by the Brookings Institution. It concluded Colorado has made intelligent decisions about regulatory needs, the structure of distribution, prevention of illegal diversion, and other vital aspects of its new market. And it has made those decisions in concert with a wide variety of stakeholders in the state. Once again, claims that regulating marijuana would leave Colorado in ruins have proven to be unfounded, said Mason Tvert, the Denver-based Director of Communications for the Marijuana Policy Project. Tvert co-directed the 2012 Colorado Initiative campaign. How many times do marijuana prohibition supporters need to be proven wrong, he said, before they stop declaring our marijuana laws are increasing teen use? They were wrong when they said regulating medical marijuana would do it, and they were wrong when they doubled down and said making marijuana legal for all adults would do it, Tvert said. Regulating marijuana is working in Colorado. The drop in teen use reflects the fact that state and local authorities have far more control over marijuana than ever before, Tvert said. Hopefully elected officials and voters in other states are paying attention. In our second Colorado story, more results from legalization are coming in. Highway fatalities have reached near record lows since marijuana legalization in Colorado. Those stone driving laws that accompany recreational marijuana legalization in Colorado and Washington were sold to us as being necessary for public safety. The specter of stone drivers was presented as something dangerous and potentially deadly. Many weed-hating cops were quite happy to find there's still legal reason to arrest potheads. Reality, meanwhile, is telling another story, as highway fatalities in Colorado are nearing record lows since pot was legalized. Now, marijuana opponents have darkly warned of a scourge of high drivers, but the fact is, we can only test for the presence of marijuana metabolites, not for being actually high on cannabis. Because everyone metabolizes marijuana and other substances differently, all a positive test tells us for sure is that the driver has smoked pot at some point in the past few days or weeks. With the loosening of laws on marijuana, you would naturally expect to see more pot use in the general population, including a higher percentage of drivers involved in fatal auto accidents who had used pot in the past few days or weeks. And you would expect a similar result in any large group of people. But that doesn't mean that marijuana caused or was even a contributing factor to accidents, traffic violations, or highway fatalities. In other words, a post-accident test for marijuana metabolites tells us almost nothing about whether cannabis contributed to that accident. Law enforcement officials in Colorado and Washington are warning that they're seeing more drugged drivers. and clueless U.S. congressmen like Representative John Mica, a Republican from Florida, have made dire predictions, such as we are going to have a lot more people stoned on the highway, and there will be consequences. Of course, anybody who's been paying attention knows that there have been huge numbers of stoned drivers on American highways already, and since at least the 1970s. Some have even called for a zero-tolerance policy, which means if you have any trace of pot in your system, you're automatically guilty of a marijuana DUI. That effectively bans most pot smokers from ever driving at all, including medical marijuana patients, many of whom are already over the 5 nanogram per milliliter limit in Washington and Colorado when they first wake up in the morning unimpaired. A month-by-month comparison of highway fatalities in Colorado through the first 7 months of this year and last year shows that deaths are down from last year and are down from the 13-year average. Of the 7 months so far this year, 5 months saw lower fatalities than last year, 2 saw a slightly higher figure this year, and 1 month was equal to last year. If these numbers were calculated as rates, such as in miles driven per highway fatality, Colorado would be at lows unseen in decades of record keeping. Highway fatality figures have also gone down in states which have legalized medical marijuana. Some researchers have suggested that better access to cannabis is making the roads at least marginally safer. The theory is that people are substituting marijuana for alcohol and are thus less impaired while driving. Now that story dovetails quite interestingly into our next one. In the United States, GOP congressmen criticize marijuana legalization and claim pot causes car wrecks. Wait a minute, Steve, you may be saying the science doesn't support them there. Well, since when have the GOP and science had much in common? Someone should really introduce them sometime. Congressional Republicans on Thursday criticized Colorado and Washington State for legalizing marijuana, claiming it causes car wrecks. Yep, Representative John Mica, that Republican from Florida, chairman of the House Subcommittee on Government Operations, claimed stronger federal laws against marijuana were needed in light of the wave of states legalizing cannabis for medical and recreational uses. Mica made the remarks during a hearing entitled Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, Operating While Stoned. Representative John Fleming, a Republican from Louisiana, couldn't resist joining in, attacking Colorado voters for their recent decision to legalize weed. Fleming pointed to a study by the University of Colorado at Denver purportedly showing an increase in traffic fatalities in the state since voters legalized medical marijuana, implying that further loosening the marijuana laws is dangerous. Interestingly, though, Fleming didn't mention another study by University of Colorado Denver professor Daniel Reese and Montana State professor D. Mark Anderson, which found that traffic fatalities dropped nearly 9% in states after they legalized medical marijuana. As marijuana is destigmatized, use goes up, and it finds its way into the homes and candy and cookies and baked goods, and once it gets there, it finds its way into the brains of teens, Representative Fleming said, evidently unaware that teens find pot whether or not it's legal. Marijuana will also become more pervasive as states continue to embrace permissible laws on medical marijuana and the recreational use of marijuana, and kids and youth will have easier access to this dangerous, addictive drug. Yeah, he really said that. But Jeffrey P. Michael, Associate Administrator for Research and Program Development for the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, testified that there is insufficient data and scientific research on the connection between marijuana use and driving. We make policy based on science, agreed Patrice Kelly, Acting Director of the Office of Drug and Alcohol Policy and Compliance for the Department of Transportation. We cannot make changes without the science. Research shows no clear connection between THC blood levels and impairment, unlike blood alcohol levels. But that hasn't stopped the implementation of unscientific marijuana DUI laws in both Washington and Colorado. Drivers in both states can be charged with impaired driving if they are caught with blood THC levels above 5 nanograms per milliliter, despite no scientific proof that this is even associated with impairment. Representatives Mica and Fleming, both Republicans, have been vocal critics of marijuana legalization. Representative Fleming, on a conservative radio show in May, claimed that marijuana use will lead to death and destruction among military veterans. But Representative Gerald Connolly, a Virginia Democrat, said it's just as possible that marijuana doesn't pose as dangerous a risk for drivers as does alcohol. Representative Connolly, in fact, suggested that drivers who've been smoking cannabis might actually slow down rather than speed up and drive recklessly. In the nation's capital this week, The D.C. Marijuana Legalization Initiative has officially qualified for the November ballot. The Washington, D.C. Board of Elections last Wednesday ruled that Initiative 71, a measure reforming D.C.'s marijuana laws, has enough valid signatures in order to qualify for the November ballot. A month ago, the D.C. Cannabis Campaign, as we reported at the time, submitted 57,000 signatures, more than twice the number recorded to qualify for the ballot. According to an ACLU report released last year, Washington, D.C. has the highest arrest rate for marijuana possession in the United States, with blacks more than 8 times as likely as whites to be arrested, despite similar rates of use. It is clear from the number of signatures the campaign was able to submit that citizens want a major change in D.C.'s marijuana laws, said Dr. Malik Burnett, D.C. Policy Director for the Marijuana Policy Project. The policies of prohibition in the district have been borne on the backs of people of color for decades. District residents can put an end to this discrimination, Dr. Burnett said. This initiative comes at a great time and in a great place, said Major Neil Franklin, Executive Director of Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. The district has one of the country's highest rates of racial disparities in arrests and is right at Congress's doorstep, where more and more political leaders from both sides of the aisle are beginning to follow their constituents and recognizing that drug policy reform is one of the most effective ways to address the problems of our current criminal justice system. Now, Initiative 71, which has qualified for the ballot, would allow adults over the age of 21 to possess up to 2 ounces of marijuana and allows for the cultivation of up to 6 marijuana plants at home. District law prevents the ballot initiative from addressing the sale of marijuana. However, the D.C. Council is currently considering a bill which would tax and regulate marijuana in the district. In Spain this week, cannabis club rules are being drafted in Catalonia, and these rules would allow cultivation and transportation of marijuana. The Public Health Agency of Catalonia, a region of Spain, is drafting these rules to regulate the cannabis sales associations which have become popular in the region. Cannabis clubs in Catalonia already have more than 165,000 members and take in about 5 million euros per month, according to published reports. This ambitious proposal aims to regulate the entire process surrounding the cultivation and transportation of marijuana by these cannabis clubs and access requirements for their members. One of the main rules is that cannabis club members can only be residents to end the cannabis tourism that is increasingly popular in cities like Barcelona. Cannabis club members will be required to be at least 21 years old. To regulate cultivation, the rules specify that cannabis production has to be provided upon prior request of partners. That is, only marijuana which has previously been charged to a specific member may be planted. Cultivation records will be required, and once a year, crops will be appraised by professional associations. In no event may cannabis clubs acquire marijuana on the black market. That way, the government has records of all legal cannabis production in the market, which is now impossible. Transportation of cannabis will also be regulated. Drivers must be on staff and must carry documentation proving they are distributing cannabis which belongs to the association. Local cannabis clubs will be prohibited from selling alcohol or tobacco. They will be permitted to install soda machines. Access to the clubs will be controlled. Nobody can enter unless they are accompanied by a member. Still under discussion is the number of grams club members will be permitted to buy each month. Amounts being discussed are between 60 and 100 grams a month, and if clubs will be limited to a maximum number of members. Administration officials in Spain have mentioned a 500-member limit, but some associations already have more than 5,000 members. There are already around 400 cannabis clubs in Catalonia, and 2 federations have already been formed. Also, still under discussion is the form of payment to buy marijuana. The Public Health Agency wants these purchases to be paid electronically and only once a month for easy oversight and control. The cannabis associations, however, do not want to limit members to just 1 purchase a month. Not everyone can predict what they will smoke in a month, the association said. Over on the other side of the globe, in Australia, a big development this week, as Norfolk Island was given the go-ahead to grow, import, and export medical marijuana. A Tasmanian company has been given the go-ahead to grow, import, and export on Norfolk Island, an external territory of Australia, which is not part of Australia's taxation or welfare system. The island's government has given permission to Tasman Health Cannabinoids, THC, get it, to grow medicinal cannabis with a view to it becoming a multi-billion-dollar exporting industry. While Norfolk Island has historically struggled financially and, like Tasmania, has been dependent upon assistance from Australia, the island's health minister, Robin Adams, explained that they are ready to turn that around. "We are open for investment. We are open for business on Norfolk Island," Adams said. "We see this as a great opportunity both for the economy of Norfolk Island while providing a much-needed medical product for export." The health minister on the island, Robin Adams, has now given us a production license to go ahead and progress to grow on Norfolk medical cannabinoids, said THC chairman Dr. Mal Washer. Heavily dependent on tourism to boost its economy, the island was hit hard by the global financial crisis. Visitors on the island dropped from 40,000 a year to just 20,000. But there's one thing going for the island when it comes to establishing a foothold in the medical cannabis business. Since Norfolk Island isn't a part of Australia's taxation system, they won't pay any income taxes. That gives them a huge advantage regarding expenses and pricing of the product. THC had been lobbying the government of Tasmania to allow cultivation there in a trial with the University of Tasmania, but the government refused. So Tasmania missed their opportunity. Adams said Norfolk Island, more than 1,300 miles away from Tasmania, was happy to jump at the chance that created. "We have our own dangerous drugs legislation, and that legislation was amended with the consent of the Commonwealth of Australia back in 1997, she said. "The company will press on with its plans on Norfolk Island rather than its home state of Tasmania for two reasons, according to Dr. Washer. One, obviously shareholders want to profit from this. I personally and a lot of shareholders feel the same way," he said. "The main reason, though, is to really try and get the best quality product we can, medical cannabinoid product, for export to the countries where it's legal." Medical marijuana, of course, is legal in a number of European countries, in Canada, and in more than 20 states in the USA. It's going to be a profitable industry, according to THC CEO Troy Langman. "In November, we're hoping to kick things off, and 3 or 4 months later, we should have our first harvest. And indoors, we're looking at around 3 harvests per year," he said. Langman has been on Norfolk Island this week, arranging the licensing and regulatory compliance. "We're still hoping to fulfill our initial order that we were lucky to obtain from Canada that was 1,000 kilograms, he said. "There will be strict growing and security requirements, according to Dr. Washer. I guess we'd be looking at a 10-acre site, and a glass house would cover the bulk of that," he said. The company is now in the process of getting enough cannabis seeds to get the project off the ground, or rather, into it. "We'll be obtaining our strains through legal channels from both universities in Australia, where there are seed banks, and also, of course, the option to obtain seeds from places like Canada and from Europe," Langman said. Adams said exactly how much tax THC would be paying to Norfolk Island. Now, as we learned, they won't be paying tax to Australia. How much tax they'll pay to the island is still under discussion, but there will likely be hefty returns to the island's coffers. "I am of the view that this new industry will align perfectly with the vision that I share with many in this community, that Norfolk Island has the potential to be a center for health and well-being in the Pacific," Adams said. THC hopes to start planting cannabis on the island in November. Remember, that's springtime in the southern hemisphere. In Russia this week, bees attacked police who were destroying a marijuana plot. I guess it makes sense that bees don't like buzzkills. Russian police suddenly found themselves in a sting operation on Tuesday when they were attacked by hundreds of angry bees as they attempted to destroy a marijuana plot close to Kostroma, northwest of Moscow. The officers fled in disorder from the scene. It turns out that a number of beehives were cleverly located in the middle of a plot of cannabis. Many of the officers were stung repeatedly, but none reportedly suffered allergic reactions. As part of an operation, the police arrived at the scene to see whether rumors that a large amount of cannabis was growing were true, said Valery Bekov, one of the officers involved in the raid. "When we got to where the cannabis was growing, there were a number of beehives. When we tried to remove the cannabis plants, the bees started to attack us aggressively," Bekov said. "We had to leave in order to get protective gear from the owner." The owner of the beehives, who helpfully provided the protective gear so that the cops could go back and destroy the rest of the plants, claimed he didn't know anything about the cannabis, saying it must have grown wild there. Then again, he would say that since growing cannabis in Russia can get you 8 years in prison. There were about 500 marijuana plants growing up to 6 feet high. When asked why he had not destroyed the cannabis, the owner claimed he didn't have enough time because he was busy caring for the bees. The plantation was destroyed and the plants were uprooted and carried away by police. one policewoman received a nasty sting on her left cheek. Police said they are now trying to determine if the bees were specifically in that cannabis patch to guard it. Before we go, we have a must-read story for you this week on TokeSignals.com. This one's called Growing Marijuana Under LED Lights, Spectrum and Wavelength. It's by a new contributor to Toke Signals named Matthew Butka. He is a lighting and cultivation expert. And he tells us that with the increasing popularity of these LED grow lights, manufacturers and distributors are innovating new ways to capture your attention. And he tells us they like to lace genuine science with a healthy dose of marketing in hopes that you pause just long enough for them to dazzle you with the latest hyperbole. There are so many terms being thrown around, it can be difficult to dissect reality from marketing hype. But Matthew helps you do exactly that in his article. So you can check it out this week on TokeSignals.com, Growing Marijuana Under LED Lights. Hope you have a great week. Until we meet again, stay lifted.